What about before we start off with the discussions about the topic, why don't we give a little introduction about yourselves and your book? So this session is also being live streamed. And
Uh-oh.
We lost her.
We can start with Kimmy.
All right.
Yes.
So I'm Kimmy Littlejohn Clark, and my first book is called 43 Days Born to Live. It's been out since February of last year. So just a story about my journey with child loss, infant loss, and how I've still continued my walk with the Lord. So, and it's on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles.
All right. Thanks, Kimmy. Let's have Father Bob.
Well,
Your turn.
Joy for the Journey, The Royal Road in Time of Distress. And it's a book that was originally thought about because of some Catholic bishops that were standing there, about 80 of them looking like that. And they had a banner above them that said, "Share our joy." So when they asked me to give do a breakout session at our charismatic convention, I said, do a breakout section on joy. Well, this is the result of the notes that I had put down and the outline I had put down. I'm a Catholic priest. I am 22 years ordained now. And before that, I was married for 24 years to a wonderful, wonderful woman. And so I have some other books that will be out after the first of the year, but I'm going to go on to the next person, whoever that is.
All right. Thanks, Father Bob. All right. We have Caitlin back. Hi there, Caitlin. We lost you.
sorry, everyone.
That's fine.
Back.
Now let's have Cleveland.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Cleveland Eason, and this is my first book, A Series of Advice on Life, and it is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble as well. I wrote this book originally back in 2001 when I was overseas in Bahrain, and I put it on the shelf for about 17 years and went back and revisited and had it actually published in 2020. I think most people know what happened in 2020, so I did little to no promotion and started promoting the book last year. But basically, it's a self-help book and provides insights of things that I wish I would have known when I was a young sailor, leaving home and having to make a lot of life decisions. So definitely, I think the target audience is between 18 to 26, but good for anybody that wants to provide advice to anybody in that age group.
Amazing. Thanks, Caitlin. So what about Janice?
Yes. All of my books are all fiction. I don't have anything that is real. And that's what I like. I enjoy fiction. I start with a book and go right through it. I just love a quick reader and enjoy everything that I read. And if I find something that I start to read and I find out it's kind of boring, I never go on and finish the book. I think that's silly. There's lots of books that I could read. I'm not going to take my time with one that really isn't something I enjoy. So all my friends encouraged me to have my books published, and I finally did it. I mean, that was 25 years ago, maybe. But I love the books, and my husband does too. And when we go to our vacation in Florida, I read the book, I read the book to him, and he tells me which doctors I named the wrong name, because I always pick the wrong name for the doctor. So he's my partner in crime. But I love reading. I like writing better than I like reading. But I think it's a good thing.
Thanks so much, Janice. Clark, is Clark your first name?
No. It isn't even my grandfather's first name.
Ah.
One I'm named for. Walter is my first name.
Walter. Hello, Walter.
Publish scientific papers under Walter Clark. So this is to differentiate. I agree with Janice. Lies are a lot more fun. So I fiction. This is, and I'm sure all of you have seen this, so you're tired of it, and I apologize. This is Outland Exile. It's the first of the series of Old Men and Infidels. I published this in 15. The sequel, the immediate sequel is Exile's Escape, which I published in 18. And wouldn't you know it, this is the one I published in November of 19. Possibly not as good a date to publish things as might have been chosen. At any rate, it's a classic trilogy. So this ends an entire story arc of Old Men and Infidels. And it's a political fiction placed 120 years into the future.
Nice. So we have 2 fiction writers, and so far 3 nonfiction. And last but definitely not the least, we have Ellie. Can someone please unmute Ellie?
There you go. Hi, Caitlin. How are you?
Good, thank you, Ellie. How are you going?
I'm good, thank you. You all know me. I'm Ellie Gassetta, and I have 2 books. I have One Caregiver's Journey, which is my memoir of taking care of my mother for 9.5 years. And she passed away here in my home at the age of 102.
Whoa.
And then my second book is a cookbook, Generations of Good Food, which is 200 recipes of our Italian family. I'm not a voracious reader because I read so much in researching for blogs, but I do read a lot, and but I do enjoy writing, and I haven't done much of that lately either. So, yeah, that's my story.
Thanks, Ellie. All right, so let's get this roundtable started. So our topic today is ebooks, how reading a book online is like. Raise your hand if you have your book published as an ebook as well. We've
Yes,
got 4 hands raised. All right, no, 5 hands raised. Okay. Who here actually reads ebooks instead of print books? I do as well. So
Just so much easier.
definitely, that's right. And that's what we'll talk about today. Pros, cons, the whys, like why people read ebooks, how people read ebooks. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. For the people who do read ebooks, just off the top of your heads, what are the reasons why you like to read books as ebooks? Yeah, Walter.
Yeah, I, up until relatively recently, traveled a good deal. So I was away from my library for half of my time. And a Kindle is a good deal lighter on your weight limitations than any other combination of books. So if someone were to ask me, which do I prefer? I certainly prefer the ebook. I mean the paper book. But the ebook certainly fills the niche that I want, and generally they're cheaper, so my price threshold is essentially gone.
Yeah. I think we're about the same. I travel a lot as well. And when I'm on public transport, and I have to admit my attention span isn't the best, so I like flipping between books. And an ebook is easier for me. And so I definitely agree with you. Anyone else?
Hmm.
Yes, Cleveland.
Yes, similar type experience here at Walter. I travel quite a bit sometimes for work as well. And it makes it a lot easier for me not to have to worry about forgetting the book or leaving the book someplace. So that'll be kind of a tragedy. My Kindle, I can have several volumes on the Kindle, and I can switch between different genres I'm reading based on my mood. So it gives you the flexibility to, as also Walter pointed out, the price point is pretty reasonable for ebooks, and the convenience of being able to use a Kindle or actually use the Kindle app on my iPad.
Yeah. So we all know it's easy and accessible, but what if I actually told you that some scientific studies have concluded that you actually read slower, less accurately, and less comprehensively on screens rather than on paper? And multiple studies have actually backed this up. Would you agree, disagree? How do you feel about that?
No surprise, whatever.
No surprise.
No
Yes.
surprise.
Yeah.
I can look down at a page rather than up at a screen. And yeah, I'm of a certain age where it doesn't necessarily work very well.
Yep. Kimmy, you wanted to say something as well?
I would say it's kind of different for me because first of all, I never really believed in ebooks until my cousin became an author, and so I've downloaded all of her books to my iPad. But I'm still up at 1 a.m. still reading, like focused, and I got to get to maybe one more chapter before I go to sleep. So I guess it just depends on your mood, maybe. Because I'm like, I'll take an ebook, but then sometimes I'm in that mood like, nope, I need to get on the couch. I have my cup of coffee and I want to hold a book.
Yeah. Hold a book is important.
What was it, Dennis?
I said, hold a book is important. And when I have a paperback in my hand and I read it, I tend to read it slower. I tend to read it, think more about it, and try to figure out everything that I've written in there. But yeah, I like the convenience of the Kindles, but I really like the feel of the book.
And I think people of the same mind when it comes to, yes, convenience, but the understanding, the feeling, the experience of actually holding a print book in your hand and reading it through still resonates with a lot of different people. If we think of, let's say, kids' books, I don't think anyone here is an author of kids' books. Kimmy, I missed your intro, so I'm not sure. But I don't think anyone here is a writer. No, but some of the studies as well show that kids enjoy ebooks less than the actual print children's books that they have in hand, and they pay more attention to a print book. Even there was a Norwegian study of 10th graders as well, and they found that those who read paperbacks actually scored higher on a post-reading comprehension test rather than those who just read from computer screens, both with informational and narrative. So fiction and nonfiction books actually came out with the same conclusion. Let's explore a little bit more on why this is actually the case with ebooks. Why do you think that people comprehend less when you are on an ebook? If we think of the Kindle experience, they've made it easy. There's backlight. It's kind of like holding paper. And still people comprehend less when reading an ebook. Why do we think that is?
I think it can happen because when you're looking at an ebook, you're on an iPad, so you can forget that you're reading. Whereas when you're holding a book, you feel it. So you feel it in your hand, so you're not going to forget that you're reading.
Yes.
There's
That's a
too
good
many other things that, oh, pardon me, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go
good.
right ahead.
I was going to say yes, Father Bob.
Oh, see, I'm so on output. That's my metaphor now for this. I think that, kids will use computers, and even though they're involved in video games and other things, there's a certain kind of experience that I agree with Kimmy, that they don't encounter that way, because true interaction really happens between the reader and a page. And I think it is different. I mean, I haven't written anything specifically, although my book is certainly out as an ebook. But the thing is that I think they're so used to doing a multiplicity of other things, it doesn't make the reading tremendously special. And I think that a lot of this, even in schools today, is there's not. I mean, I was reading a thing the other day about reading scores for a lot of the 12th graders in this country are reading at a 6th grade reading level, and some of the 6th graders are reading at a 3rd grade reading level. And so they're not. I used to teach remedial reading, years ago, and that's one of the things where how you get involved in it. You pose questions to the text, and that means you have to go. I think that Janice said that you have to go slower in a way at your own pace. Whereas it's just so easy to take your mouse, and go down with it and move that page along. And I think the idea there too is most of the reading that these kids will do is episodic in textbooks. So for them to understand, like I was teaching English, and one of the things that they never could understand in the 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade was conflict that wasn't violent conflict. They couldn't understand the concept of internal conflict, or conflict in a way, even as a literary term, as one of the characteristics of our writing, which is you present a conflict and then it's usually resolved, and maybe somewhat not to our desire, but there it is. So that's one of the two things I think. Interaction with the book is absolutely necessary. I think as you do that, you get a better idea, better comprehension. And also it puts it in a different category than the thing that they do, maybe the activity of preference, such as video games and other things that may be more or less inane. Anyway, yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. Cleveland?
Yes, I also agree with that we have a multitasking audience, with especially even though I have the Kindle app on my iPad, I could get distracted by other apps and alerts, and my Gmail might give me an announcement, and I get distracted away from that. So it really does the electronic. Even though the Kindle is pretty limited as far as its apps, but as I said, I have several volumes on there, so I can actually get distracted by another book.
Yep.
So, but when you're actually holding a book, you're definitely focused in on that particular subject.
Yeah, I agree with Father Bob and Cleveland, both of you. It was an interesting one that Father Bob pointed out about reading comprehension. I read an article recently about a university professor who was sacked because most of his class failed. His class, I think, more than 50%. And what he said is the difficulty of my course has not changed over the 30 years I have been teaching at this university. It's just the reading comprehension of the students has gone down. According to PRI and a podcast called Takeaway, actually use different parts of the brain when they're using, or when they're reading an ebook versus reading a print book. And that's because the more you read on screens, the more your mind shifts towards the non-linear reading, a practice which involves just skimming. When you're scrolling and skimming a screen, having your eyes kind of just dart the page looking for keywords. Your brain actually shifts to that type of reading when you're reading an ebook rather than a print book. So that's a very interesting point that you've pointed out, that you've both pointed out about reading and reading comprehension. A psychologist, Kate Garland, she actually did a study called "Do eBooks Make It Harder to Remember What You Just Read?" And she actually reported on subjects needing to read multiple times before understanding to the same degree as those reading in print. So you can see the trend of the drop in reading comprehension. Walter, did you want?
I'm fascinated that we have so much documentary evidence of the dumbing down of America, and nobody seems to be much concerned about it. One of the problems with ebooks, though, is that you can go to a footnote, which of course is not at the foot of that page, but it's really an end note. And then when you come back, the page is being repaginated. So I read,
Yes.
and it's sort of like, yeah, I remember that place. I didn't mark it, but I remember it was at the top of the left-hand page, and I can go back and I can, go back and forth, and I eventually figure out where it is. In a Kindle, I'm pretty much, unless I can find a peculiar word and search for it, then I'm pretty much lost. I'll never make the connection again.
You've actually given us a really nice segue into our next point about ebooks, which is navigation of ebooks versus physical books. And I was going to say that studies show, and exactly like you said, Walter, when people try to locate a piece of information, they often do it based on where in the text it happened, including size, color, location of information within the page, in a sequence of pages. When I read a book, I usually go, oh, if my book was this thick, I remember my favorite part was in the first third of the book.
Yes.
Or it was in the top section, and I'm looking for that word, trying to find my favorite quote or my favorite part of the book. And you can't really do that with Kindles. My Kindle has those little page flip buttons that you just press on the side, and you can't really skip 200 pages in one go. So definitely the navigation of ebooks is different to the navigation of print books, and that also gives to the experience of reading a book. Does it have any comments about that?
I do. I was thinking that when I write a paper or have a paperback that I wrote, I can sometimes want to hand it to someone so they can keep it, and it makes some kind of something about the two of us, and suddenly she's a person that's writing my books, and it builds to one another. But the last time that I wrote a book, it was one of the scariest books I ever made, and I don't usually make those. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was writing this book, which is the scariest book I've ever written, and I had to go to bed because I was afraid, and I wrote the book, and I thought, how can I be afraid? It's this, I wrote this. But yeah, I miss the paperbacks. I lots of times will give a friend, when I see them, I'll give them one of my books, because it's a personal thing, and I like to give them part of it.
Mm-hmm.
As authors, it comes about that we pass up an exhausting and yet wonderful thing of book signings. And you see a line of 20. This past 2 weeks ago, I had a book signing, and it was like 20 or 30 people lined up. And I thought, oh yeah, I've arrived, kind of thing. But it is wearying if it's successful. I think unless you get a place where you're very facile in scribbling something out and you can do it real fast. But I prefer to have it be understood.
Yeah.
So I think that we'd have a very hard time getting an ebook signed. And I agree with Janice. It would be the thing of here's my cell phone. You can get it on. You can get it on whatever a link I'm going to send to you or whatever, or you can go on Amazon or whatever you possibly Barnes and Noble, and we'll get that. Yeah. But you're not really to participate in too many book signings. Can I ask a question of you all? Do you know of people who write solely for the ebook market?
Absolutely.
What is that like?
I have no idea. I don't.
Oh.
It can't be any different, is it? Is it any different?
It is. I think the marketing would be different. I think that the interaction with your readers, as Janice is saying, she wants to give them a book. Well, that's an interaction with one of your readers, and that's just really important to me, because it helps you to form your audience so that you know kind of what flies and what doesn't fly.
But if you have a web page, people can get a hold of you anyway.
Sure.
I don't know, what's the difference between having a paperback and having a book that's only an ebook with your readers, in that if they're going to get a hold of you, they have to go someplace to get a hold of you. And if they go, let's say they buy your book on Amazon, they can pull up a profile, or they can Google you. I mean, Google, everybody Googles, they can Google you and Google that book title, and they can send you a message. I don't know that it's maybe I'm wrong. And Caitlin, you can certainly tell me if the information you have suggests differently, but I would suggest that whether you have a hardback book in your hand or you're reading on a screen, your readers can get to you should they want to. I mean, there's a way to get to, where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, we all know that.
My idea in saying that was that you have a unique possibility when you're doing book signings of having a one-on-one kind of actual human transaction. Anybody that's built customer service for anybody in the past year or two, you get a robot voice. And with me, my problem's always too hard to solve by them. So I'm yelling and screaming, I want to talk to a human. And eventually the robot hears that word human. But I mean, I think it's got to do partly, we're already, I think that Walter mentioned about the dumbing down of our education. We also have dumbed down our sociology, where there are kids who primarily react to people on Facebook and on TikTok and on other things that are far more towards the children, towards other kids. And yet, a lot of times, have you ever seen the people at table? Everybody's got a cell phone. Nobody's talking to them in families. And what I'm thinking is that the electronic media have a tendency to wish to displace the more traditional and tried and true, I might say, aspect of words, either printed or inscribed or going back to parchment on a page. I know that's not a great analogy, Ellie, but the idea was, I didn't say that it wasn't a good idea, that I didn't agree with you on that. I didn't disagree on why.
No, Father, not at all. Not at all, Father. But the premise of what I'm hearing you say is that communication in general has changed. it's communication as opposed to whether it's just an ebook or a regular book.
Yep.
I will tell you that when the family gathers at my brother's house, and this has gone on for years, all the young people, everybody puts their cell phones in the kitchen on the counter, and they all sit at the table to force themselves to talk. One of the other things about students, maybe perhaps not comprehending, is that most students now, even college level, they do their work. They don't do their work necessarily from textbooks. They do their work on their Surface Pads or their iPros or their computers. So we've gone from let's hold it in our hand and read See Jane Run to we're looking at screens. We have become, how many people do you know who in their work environment are working off of 2, sometimes 3 screens at a time? So we've become a screen environment. So reading on a Kindle or a Nook or your phone or your iPad or your computer, that's where it is. And you know, I'd hate to think that we're all too old that we can't figure that out, but that's where it is.
I think technology is moving in one way, definitely, but there's still some things that are better, I'd say, non-digitally. And before we get into other forms of media, because I think that's a really good space that we can explore and discuss, Walter.
In the peculiar area of scientific research, it also depends on what's been digitized or not. So you have this great horizon of people that, you know, when they think of an idea for a study, and the first thing you do is you go back and make sure nobody else has done this before. That's entirely reasonable. But then because of this great digitalization horizon, the papers, the journals that have been published before, 1990 haven't been digitized, or 1980 or whatever. And it's like, Calvin and Hobbes, color was invented in 1960 sort of thing. That scientific research only started in 1990. And all these papers, and there's in my own area, which is this tiny little part of medicine, it really is minute. They're redoing studies without much additional sophistication that have been done 30 years ago. And it's sort of like, I don't need to read this paper again. I read it. In fact, I wrote it.
Father Bob?
Something controversial, so I expect everybody to chew on me a little bit. I could use a good chewing, I have to admit. And that is, I think we talk about revisionist history, and there is a lot of that around today. You don't have to concede that to me for me to make my point, however. I do believe that this trend of electronicizing everything is exactly what Walter was saying, that you get the impression maybe medicine started in the 1850s and just got so great from then. They don't have Galen's, and they don't have Hippocrates as a basis for this. But the point being there is that it has the effect of separating people from our very real and, to me, honored past. So Ellie said, see Jane Run. I would say to be or not to be. In other words, it's not just junk literature that's put there. It would be, Shakespeare would be Shakespeare by any other name except the Duke of whatever that they think wrote his stuff. But anyway, I think it creates a climate where children get, if they're like me, I'm a grandfather. I was married for 24 years before I became a priest. My wife died. And So I'm a grandfather. Now, one of the things is when you're talking to these kids, there used to be a thing called the generation gap. Those of you who are older than 40 may remember, may have heard of that. I see, Caitlin, you heard of it too, and you're not 40 even. So
No, I'm not. But I do
now,
know it.
good for you. Enjoy it, believe me. But I mean, I think it has the effect of separating us more. We're separated politically. We're separated financially. We're separated almost as much as we were during Lincoln's presidency. And the idea is that I think that this takes it to a new level because it really makes more of a gap. You could call it, the USB gap or something, figure out a name for it. But I think it really doesn't have the effect of you having some feeling that people have lived before we lived, and that many of those people made extremely great contributions to human society. And even though all that stuff's available practically on screen, it's not so much the content as the effect. So I throw that controversial statement out and see if there's any response to that.
Walter wants to talk.
Yeah. I see it's controversial, but it's okay. That's what we're here for. We're here to talk about things. And I can see Walter wants to say something to that, Father Bob.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take an awful lot of exception to you. I'd love to bite you, but it's all right. One of the things about ignoring history is you can fill it up with anything else you want. So the point about revisions is that you can write a past history. And in fact, since it's electronic, you can change your past history at any point in the future. You can, that is very much the point of my series of books, was that we're rapidly becoming an old and a new nation simultaneously. And the old nation will have some problems, but the new nation has some very visceral and essential problems that can't be fixed. Because if you have no stories of your own, the stories you get will always be the ones somebody else writes for you. So that this comes up all the time with I mean, it comes to the point in my book as where even the geography has changed, as they essentially just they didn't want the current generation to think that they left a huge continent unoccupied, so they just removed it. And the Great Plains are a few hundred kilometers wide instead of most of America.
Here, here.
I think it's such an interesting way to think about how society has moved in terms of technology, but also in terms of the availability of information. Because if we're thinking back at the times of Shakespeare, like Father Bob was saying, yes, everything was in print, but they only had access to whatever was in the place they were at. So then they never had access like we do through eBooks or through other forms of media, information from across the world. And even better, there's things like Google Translate. So then we even have access to forms of media and to eBooks of people in different countries, in different languages. And so there's definitely different ways of seeing how this is affecting us as a society and us as consumers of media. And of course, there's always two sides of coin, like what Father Bob was saying of changing history or filling in the gaps, like what Walter was saying. But on the flip side, because information is so available, does that mean people can then point out and correct you when there is actually information being spread, which is what we actually see on social media that's happening right now. If you're on Twitter, people will call you out if you're spreading misinformation, I think is really interesting. James has said that I think the word revisionism is changed. I believe the word should mean positively in terms of changing or editing an information to make it better rather than to reinterpret it. Thanks, James. That's also a really, really good way of saying revision. And I think it's a good, yes, Janice.
I was thinking when I first wrote my first book, I felt like I received a gift. I mean, all of a sudden I had this wonderful idea for a book, a paperback, and everything after it was still, they all remained a murder mystery. That sounds real great, doesn't it? A murder mystery. But actually, that's what I like to read. So that's what I like to write. And I did, after I got my Parkinson's disease, I started finding out that I had all these gifts, things I could do. I mean, things I wanted to write. So I wrote 6 books in like 5 days. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
My husband would be coming home from work and I would be leaving to go to bed. I mean, I was just completely obsessed with it. But
Wow.
I also learned all kinds of things from inventory. I mean, from Don, what's the book I'm looking for? Anyway, this all of this has been very helpful for me. And when I hear people say about things, these terrible things that have happened, they've had to go through these things. I was lucky. I got a good thought in my children now read these, and I've got a daughter that reads children's stories, and it's all kind of gone on. So it's just something I enjoy.
Thanks, Janice. And I agree. I love reading books, especially fantasy books. And so that's my little niche that I read as well. Anyway, so I wanted to also explore other forms of media and how the movement of technology has affected them. For example, art pieces. So in 1935, Walter Benjamin, in his essay and his paper, concluded that there's an aura to viewing art in person that you don't really get when you see a picture of art. And I will agree with this because I love art museums. And when I'm in an art museum, I absolutely bask in the art. However, someone actually, MIT did a study, and they actually reported that people seeing art in virtual reality or augmented reality respond equally, or if not even more so than if they view art in person. So what other forms of media do you think is also changing from in-person to more technology-based?
That's a hard one.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Because I think you've hit upon it all. I think you've hit upon it all.
I think so, yeah.
I think that, I don't find this to be, and I'm going to take exception with Father Bob. I don't find this to be an issue. I think with the exception of probably Kimmy and Caitlin, we're all of a certain age where most of our contemporaries and possibly some of us are afraid of social media. We're afraid of computers. We don't learn everything we can do. How many people do you know, as I do, who don't have a computer? They don't even have cable television because they don't. And it's not that they can't pay for it or they don't want to. They just do not like anything that is outside of the realm of what they like. I, on the other hand, think social media allows allows you, and even if it is changed, so what?
Yeah.
There are so many options and so many other things that come along with digitizing things. So you have a digital, you have your book on the Civil War, or you can read it off of your screen, and you could say, well, it's digital and they can change it, and absolutely they can. I'd hate to tell you, Clark, how many people I know who will tell you that their medical records were changed in the while they were in the hospital, because the ink wasn't drying on the record anymore. They're putting it in, and if you said something, that was it. But the point
That
being,
was a problem that was solved too. So I can understand the fear, but it's also been dealt with.
But
I don't get it,
think
Ellie. Could you say it again? I didn't quite get your point there about
the point is
people and their medical records.
that history can be written. You can have history written on a digital level, or you can have history written on a hardback book. It's still history, and they can, and yes, I agree with you that they can make revisions and they can change it, but everything is revised. And I just think that sometimes after a certain age, people just would prefer not to mess with computers, or not to mess with.
Well, in general, I would agree with you.
And I think figure that out. Sir.
Okay, I agree to that point, but what I was not asking you about that, I was asking you about your anecdote about, a lot of people that said somehow their medical records were changed, and I didn't get the next part after that. They were transferred to digitization, or how does that play out? What do you mean by that?
Well, it can be omitted. I'll give you an example. I had an aunt that did not have an attendant in the recovery room, and she fell out of the gurney. And rather than it was never recorded in the medical record. Everybody knew it. They knew it happened. She was actually bruised from her head on the whole side that fell, but they would never admit that and that's fine. She passed away and is in her eternal home. But nonetheless, the digital pieces of it are, the ink used to dry. The ink used to dry on the records, and now they don't.
I get you now. Thank you.
It's interesting,
Yes, sir.
Ellie, because you could kind of say the root of problems like that is actually the humans behind the information.
Yes,
That's right.
absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Walter,
Yeah, I mean, if you don't put it down on the record, you cannot put it down on the record, whether it's paper and ink, or not put it down on the record if it's electronic. The question is when you interpolate, somebody says, well, I ordered that at 5 o'clock and they ordered it at 8 o'clock, and the problem happened at 5:30. That has been fixed. I mean, the parts of a medical chart all fit together. And so, you orders things and the nurse picks it up and the nurse gives it, and then you record that it has been given. So that, it certainly couldn't be faked, but what they've done now, or over time they've figured it out, is that it's when you push the button, it's locked. And subsequently, if you want to, you can make it revisions, but they are timed. You have to cross out what you did wrong, put in the time, and change things so that it now reaches the level of security of a written record, which I agree to be very secure because it's been made that way over the years.
Okay, Caitlin, I didn't mean to hijack it. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. It's what this roundtable is about. Just speaking with other authors and just sharing ideas. And I think it's great that we were able to have this discussion and everyone is listening to each other. And that's the value of these sessions. But just just because I'm conscious of time, I would just like to touch on one more point, which I think we should talk about, and we've been focusing a lot on ebooks has changed this, or they're like people don't read as well with ebooks and things like that. But I would actually also like to throw in there that some people actually read better with ebooks. And I'm actually talking about people with learning disabilities, let's say people with dyslexia. So studies have actually found that people with dyslexia actually read easier on ebooks rather than on print books. So my question to you guys now is, what are the benefits of you reading an ebook? And we've already talked about accessibility and how easy it is to bring around, but what else? What else do you think is the good thing about reading on an ebook? Yes, Walter.
By far and away, they are cheap. I made a specific point of making my first book 99 cents because I can make a joke, say something, the first book's really expensive on a Kindle. It's almost $1. And everybody laughs about it and thinks about it. But if I can get somebody to expend as much as $1 on an ebook with the first book of my series, I got them. I mean, I feel like I'm a street corner opiate dealer. I trick them out with just, it's free today, but it's going to be expensive tomorrow. Because I think my characters are seductive, and they certainly were seductive for me.
Whoa.
Thanks, Walter. Yes, Cleveland.
Yes, I mean, yeah, definitely accessibility is one of the big advantages. And I also believe, even though it may sound like it's not true, it's just your ability to reach an international audience. And as most people recognize, when you go into a Barnes and Noble or Amazon, those thousands of books. And so how do you we talked about book covers last time. That might be one way to attract a reader. But if you have an ebook, you have a good website, you have good promotion of your website, that could actually draw in those ebook readers and actually allow you to reach an audience that you may not ever expected. I do like the personal interaction, as Father Bob stated, where you actually get to interact with a reader during a book signing. But your website could actually be a good portal, and if they have an ebook format, as Walter pointed out, you could actually entice them to get the first edition in the trilogy, and hopefully they're looking up for the next bite.
Thank you, Cleveland. You've been a little quiet. Do you have anything to say?
I was going to say there is an advantage, like everyone else has pretty much said. It's cheap when you get an ebook and convenient, especially when you're traveling. But I've definitely considered, even for my next book coming out, to probably make it an ebook also. So I think it's a good idea to have an ebook, especially in these days.
Kimmy, well, and I agree with Kimmy. Because I've got a cookbook, and just about everybody I know seldom. I mean, they'll seldom pick this up, but they'll set up their iPad and they'll go to the recipe that they want, and they'll just work off of the ebook version while they cook it. So it depends on what you're writing and what you're reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you do it, because I literally look at recipes that way on Alexa or So it's convenient. So you probably should put your book on a
It is.
make a book.
It is.
Timmy, what's your new book? Are you writing a new book right now?
Yes. I'm still in a trying to decide if it's going to end with chapter 8 or chapter 9.
Okay.
I'm there. I'm close to the finish line, but yeah, my second book, I want to
Nice.
get it out. Yeah.
Nice. And
Yes.
I love the discussion about reaching a broader audience. Like Cleveland said, people all around the globe have access to your book, to your book, even if they're across the world and in different languages, I think is the other interesting thing to put on there. One thing I will also say is if you have your book on something like Goodreads, I don't know if anyone's been on Goodreads, but a lot of different people can read the book and then put their own annotations on it. So it's actually another form of communication where people are reading the same book and sharing thoughts about the book by putting annotations or highlighting or just commenting. So it becomes a more social experience when you're not in the same area, not like the book clubs of the old where you read the book and discussed it in person. Now you do it on others as well. So it's been very interesting to see how the reading experience has changed from when we read in the ebooks. But I will personally just say we've discussed the pros and the cons of having an ebook, and at the end of the day, you authors can decide for yourselves then whether or not you want to publish as print and ebook, or just ebook, or just print. Now you know the pros and the cons of both. So talk to your publishing consultants about it.
I think you can still feel and you can definitely still be in the moment, because if I was reading one of Janice's murder books, I would definitely feel it. Oh, I'm in a Lifetime movie moment. Like, so I mean, I think you can still feel. I don't knock it. I definitely, like I said, I think this next book will probably be an ebook also.
I'd just like to remind everyone to get their books ready, because we'll take a screenshot with everyone's books up. We're coming to the end of the session. So thank you so much. Such a participative bunch, and I feel like we've had some really good conversations about ebooks, and hopefully that's helped you guys make a decision in the future if you want to publish your books as ebooks or keep them exclusively print, or the other way around. Does everyone have their books up? And if you don't,
Yeah.
give a thumbs up. There we go. Everyone smile. Oh, wait, we've got Janice. Give Janice 1 second.
Let me put this, okay.
Okay, let's give us a file instead. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Go on. That's the
Janice or
Roundtable
Caitlin,
session. Sorry?
let's, I'd like to thank Reader's Magnet for putting this on and for all they're doing with the Festival of Storytellers. This has been an extraordinary event the last 10 days or so that we've been on. We still have tomorrow for roundtables, but I'd just like to thank the staff and management at Reader's Magnet for all they've done for this and for the great work that they're doing in letting us authors showcase our work and our brands and our books.
Thank you, Ellie. You have more roundtable sessions tomorrow.
I have
it's-
one tomorrow.
That's right.
Yes,
It's day
forward
7 of
to
the Festival of Storytellers. Ellie, why don't you talk about your session tomorrow?
What is my session tomorrow?
Actually, I've got it up here. Did you want me to just...
Yeah,
I'll
tell
do
me.
Tomorrow at 11 a.m., we have Ellie, who will be talking about importance of a website for your book.
Website, webpage.
All about websites, correct.
Website. And that should be a pretty interesting discussion, just like this one was. Caitlin, you were very well prepared. You were just a super moderator. That's
Here,
Thank
here.
you, Ellie. Thank you, Ellie. I really appreciate having
You
such a-
rock, little girl.
I only rocked because everyone else here rocked as well. No one else talked, it would have been a very dead session. So thank you so much, everyone.
All right.
All right.
Bye now.
Bye for now.
See you at
Bye.
the Bye.
Now I can reach them.
Back to the old grindstone here.
There you go.